Financial experts have raised concerns over Nigeria's rapidly increasing national debt, calling it a troubling development. This follows President Bola Tinubu's recent request to the National Assembly for an additional $2.2 billion loan equivalent to 1.767 trillion naira to help cover the 9.7 trillion naira deficit in the proposed 28.7 trillion naira 2024 budget. Dr. Muda Yusuf, CEO of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, highlighted the alarming rise in public debt during an interview. He noted that Nigeria's total public debt stood at 12.6 trillion naira in 2015, but as of June 2024, it had surged to 134 trillion naira, an increase of over 900%. Yusuf emphasized that borrowing should ideally strengthen the economy's capacity to repay debt, underscoring the importance of productive use of loans to avoid further financial strain. And now to discuss this, we're joined by CEO of Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, Dr. Muda Yusuf himself. Dr. Muda, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now let's start by asking what exactly your concerns are, that of the financial experts and that of financial experts with regards to Nigeria's increasing debt profile. I ask because some experts have said borrowing is not bad in itself. So what side do you lean to?
No, I agree with the position that borrowing in itself is not a bad thing. What is important, just as you said in your intro, first is the use to which we commit the borrowing. Because essentially, we are supposed to use all this borrowing to build the capacity of the economy to be able to repay the loan. Either building the human capacity or building the infrastructure, physical infrastructure capacity, in a way that is cost effective, in a way that can properly fit into the principles of value for money. That is one. Secondly, it's about the sustainability of the debt. And sustainability has to do with the cost of the debt, that is the interest payment on the debt. And secondly, about the tenor of the debt. Those two are also very critical because no matter how noble the objective is, if the costs of the debt, I'm talking now about the interest payment on the debt, if it's too high, then it imposes a lot of burden, on the government and on the people. It also creates an issue of, resources that you normally should have used to do other things, use it to begin to service debts. So we need to also be cautious about the burden of debt service. So
Dr. Muda,
is why we need to be very strategic in the choice of debt.
Okay. So Dr. Muda, how can the government then strike a balance between meeting its borrowing needs and also supporting private sector growth and also the debt as well, which is currently being stifled by government borrowing?
Well, what is important is to ensure that the debt is spent in a way to improve private sector productivity. For instance, one of the biggest challenges that the private sector is facing now is the challenge of infrastructure. So if we commit the debt to building infrastructure, that will help private sector productivity. And that will help the economy. It also benefit the people. So that, for me, is extremely very, very important. The second thing is that we should commit or we should focus more on multilateral debt. And that is what I think the government is doing, at least under this administration. Multilateral debts are debts owed to the multilateral organization like the ADB, like the World Bank, like the IMF, because their interest rates are generally very low, at best maybe 2%, sometimes it's 1%. And their tenors are also very high, although they also have the challenge of exchange rate risk, because most of these multilateral debts are also in foreign currency. So if you have an exchange rate depreciation, it could also pose a problem. But from the point of view of the costs, I'm talking of the interest rate and the tenor, I think it's a good one. Then the second one, I'm talking of external debt now, is the bilateral debt. Bilateral debt most times doesn't come in cash. It comes in terms of commitment to projects, just as we have with the Chinese loans. Chinese loans are devoted to specific projects, and they're also involved in the execution of the project. So you can easily see what those funds are used for.
Indeed.
So those are the things I think can bring value both to the private sector and even to the government itself. But we need to worry about costs. And the cost of domestic borrowing is extremely very high. But when government is borrowing at over 20%, it creates a whole lot of problem both for the cost of financing the debt in terms of debt service, and also the issue of crowding out of the private sector in the financial markets. So these are the things that we worry about when we talk about debt management.
Okay, especially that bit about the Forex and the exchange rate, how it happens. I mean, 900% increase since 2015. It had to be about the Forex. But recently, you highlighted the need to reduce Nigeria's reliance on Eurobonds. Here, can you elaborate on the potential risks associated with Eurobond exposure and propose perhaps maybe strategies for Nigeria to minimize these risks?
Eurobonds are commercial debts. They are not as concessionary as the multilateral debt or the bilateral debts. And the interest rate we often pay is also very high. Sometimes it's close to 10%, which is high by global standards, because some countries get it at 3%, 4%. We are getting it at between 9 and 10%. That is extremely very high. So we need to also be careful so that we don't enter into a debt engagement that will be putting pressure on our reserves. Because if you look at the data with regard to international payments, a lot is going to debt service, sometimes even higher than remittances and even letters of credit. So in order to minimize that kind of pressure, as much as possible, I think we should avoid the Eurobond because it is too costly. So that is why we are suggesting that we should concentrate more either on domestic debt with lower interest rate, of course, or on multilateral and bilateral debts.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Doctor. And, well, we'll come to you next time again when we need details of the sort. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.